it's me, Alura. Welcome back to my channel. It's so good to have you all here with me once again. So with the channel, I have to admit, have been a little discouraged in keeping up with the video aspect of it because the views have gone down a whole lot. And I've noticed that that was because there was a period in time where I got like super busy. And if you aren't keeping up with your channel, the algorithms are going to go down and you're not going to show up in recommendations or in mainstream. It's going to be more subscriber based, and that's what it's been, for quite some time now. And I want to continue doing the videos for all of you that do watch and do have interest, but like I'm still super busy, so I have to try to plan a little bit better when I'm going to do the videos. Plus it gives me a little time to spend with you, even though we're not actually sitting side by side and I can't see you. So welcome. Today I want to talk with you about grief. Grief is a huge subject spiritually, and I feel that when it comes to grief, people don't really know what to expect and they don't know how to cope with it. And there are some, also that are witnessing others experience grief and don't quite understand it. So first of all, when it comes to grief, you are first going to experience shock, because when you lose somebody, you're so used to having that person with you by your side in your life all the time that when they're not there, it just kind of feels like they've gone on a vacation, or maybe they're out for the day. And in the shock portion of grief, you keep telling yourself that, like, every single day. It's like you wake up, it's like, oh, they're not here, they'll be home. And that goes on for like a long time. That's why some people, there are very judgmental people out there. Like if somebody doesn't cry at a funeral or react, some people will say, how could they do that? How could they like not cry? And it's because they may be in shock. They may not be processing that the person is gone. Then there are others that are like completely in shock to where they know that that's what's happening. They're accepting it to some degree, and so they're crying and they're expressing it. Those are the ones that you see, showing their emotions. After a little while, especially if it's somebody super close to you, after the shock period kind of dies down and never goes away, because you're going to always carry that shock that the person isn't there, of course. Imagine for someone like me, for an example, who has had a father, in my life that was with me for 37 years and passed on. I've seen him for 37 years every single day. So it's really hard to not see him physically. Nevertheless, at first it felt like that. It felt like he was just somewhere else, and there were times when we would pull up to the house and I would see, his truck there, and I would think, oh, Dad's home. And then, I had to process it again, like, no, he's gone. So that's also something that you'll experience when going through grief, is not really coming to terms with the fact that the person isn't there because you're so used to having them there. So then there will come a time where you get super emotional and you're not really associating it with the grief itself because some time has gone by, maybe a couple of months. There are some people out there that they start getting very upset. They get anxious, and any little thing kind of sets them off to where they're like freaking out in anger and rage, because deep down inside, subconsciously, it's that they lost somebody. There are others that they try to pretend like it doesn't exist. They won't talk about it. They don't want to hear about it. And they'll just go about life, as if the person never existed at all. So when a person is freaking out, though, going through those periods of rage and blame and just taking it all out on whoever they can, that's called bereavement. And that's when grief has taken another level in its development. And grief, turning into bereavement, is where kind of borderlines post-traumatic stress disorder, because if a person has lost somebody and they're not coming to terms with it, and they're angry and they're full of rage and they're just kind of like freaking out and collapsing all the time, then that's because they're traumatized by the situation. Now, a lot of people will cry about losing the person for a very, very long time. you can't expect somebody that has lost somebody to not cry about it for, up to at least a year or two. It's still pretty fresh. The wound is not healed, because you're going to spend at least 6 months trying to process that the person isn't in your life anymore at all already. And then once that 6 months passes by, now it's trying to really, come to terms with the fact you're not going to see them again. It's going on with life without the person. And it's like trying to figure out how to do that, because you're so used to doing certain things. So you're spending that 6 months trying to accept it, getting over the emotional aspect of it. And then you're going into the next phase, which is another 6 months of, wow, I remember when we used to do this and we used to do that. And, that's not there no more. So now you're trying to find things to kind of fill in that spot that's void now. So then the D-Day comes. D-Day is like the anniversary of the person's death, the first year. And it's hard because that trauma, because losing somebody is traumatic either way. Some experience it to an extreme, some just a little. Either way, extreme or little, when you come around to that D-Day, you're going to be remembering what happened that year before, because this is the same day that claimed the person that you care about, And then after that, it'll start to get a little easier from there on. Birthdays for the person are going to be hard. You're going to feel guilty sometimes, especially if you don't observe their birthday. You don't have to stop observing their birthday. You can still do things for them. You don't have to pretend that they aren't there anymore. Like, for an example, if you lose like a parent or a sibling or a child or whatever the case may be, you can always still get a cake and sit down and sing and just in remembrance of them. And even for Christmas, put a little something on the tree, like an ornament that represents them. Like, dealing with grief doesn't have to be impossible. Little things like that to show love and remembrance for them can really make a big deal in the healing process. And don't try to think of all the sad things either, because a lot of people, when they are grieving, they think about the sad things. They think about, oh, I didn't get to do all this, and I shouldn't have said that, and I shouldn't have acted this way. And that's just punishing yourself, tormenting yourself. You want to think about the good times of that person, because the only way that a person will ever live on here is through the people that loved them. As long as that you still love them and you're keeping those memories alive, then you're keeping that person here, And you can do that through like reliving their traditions, or keeping up with the traditions that you did with them, with others. And always tell people stories about that person, like, hey, we used to do this, and revisit places when you're ready. Go back to places when you're ready and try to remember those memories, and bring somebody that you care about with you and tell them, hey, we used to come here, and this is what I learned and what I did with this person. And that helps in the healing process too. And if you keep that up throughout the years, that will definitely help to keep that person's memory alive. Where a lot of people, when they lose someone, I've noticed nowadays with the way that the world has become, a lot of people, they just are so self-absorbed, and they lose a person, and then it takes a couple months, and then they're quickly back to their old way of doing things again, and that other person that's gone is gone for good. You don't want that to happen, because they live on through us, and that's the way that we keep that person's essence here, through that consciousness. They live on through our heart and through our consciousness. So a lot of people have asked me this question, what happens when you die? And that is a very good question, because it's different for a lot of people. There is one thing that's very similar for everyone, which is when you pass on, you are going to go through a dark tunnel. A lot of people get afraid. I had an uncle once, he was passing away. He's big Christian. Like, he loved God, talked about Jesus all the time. And he expected to see Jesus with his arms open, to embrace him. And that wasn't the case. When he was passing on, he was, halfway in and out, and he kept saying, I see the dark tunnel, and he would bring himself back like he was fighting to not die. And I went there and I told him, and I said, listen, what you're experiencing is normal. You're going to see him, or whomever you need to see. Just don't be afraid, and just go with the flow. there will be light. That's just you getting ready to pass through the physical nature. And I held his hand, and he passed through his physical nature, through that dark essence of matter, because it's a heavier, denser consciousness than your light within, and that's why, because you're going through that and you're separating from the light of this world that you see, with your eyes, to passing into a whole other form of light. And there's this barrier of the physical body that you have to go through first. So that's going to be dark, and then suddenly you'll go to that secondary light, and that's when you'll see someone that you love waiting there for you, or you might end up seeing a spiritual guide, which is, just as wonderful. And then you'll go through your life review. Your life review is to see if you can understand your life. And through the life review, you get to see the hidden elements of your life too, like things people said behind your back, things that were done behind your back. You get to see things that you did that you may not have even noticed in the way that they looked when you did them, or how you said things, or the way that you spoke to people if you didn't have that awareness. And that shows you a little bit of everything, so that at the end of that life review, you're not just being judged by spirit, you're judging yourself, and that's what creates the karmic lessons for the next life or next experience. And then what happens is that however your consciousness is at that time is where you're going to go next. Let's say you still have that 3D nature, you're hanging on to a lot of attachments and things here. Let's say you had a compulsive personality, you wanted what you wanted when you wanted it, so you're a little bit of a spoiled brat, and maybe had some anger issues, and other than that, just a fun-loving person that tried to do the best that they could in life. What's going to happen is, with your idea of heaven and all of those other aspects, you're going to end up joining with someone else and many others that have passed on around that same time that have a similar view of heaven and similar, problems and attachments. And you're going to go into a realm together. And it may be a little imperfect, and it'll seem like you're kind of going on with life, and you're not going to remember when it started. Of course, it's going to have a starting story just like this one does, where you're told you're born and you're brought into this world. You'll have something like that happen, and then you'll just go on living there until you start to work on those, little lessons that are more aware to you, so that you have a chance to not bring them into the next lifetime. And you'll just have to work on whatever's left karmically in your next physical life. And that's what happens for a lot of people. Some people will go into what their idea of heaven is for rest. Like, let's say they don't have a lifetime that's fully scheduled right away. You may not be scheduled to reincarnate right away. So if that's the case, you'll go to, your idea of heaven, and you'll be there with others, that also picture heaven that way too. And like I said, there's always that aspect of a person creating their own heaven or hell with others that are like them. But that's what happens when you pass on. And just like you have to be psychic here to speak to those on the other side of this curtain of the spiritual world, they have to also have a psychic ability to do that too. It takes, or if you're talking with someone that has an authority to command spirit, or the ability to read blueprints in the Akashic records to know where that person is, to find them, to channel them for you, that's different. But usually, they don't have the ability to communicate, and they're over there in like a whole other mindset, focusing on what's going on there, just like you're here focusing on what's going on here. So that's why a lot of people have come to the assumption that most mediums are channeling, lower vibrational spirits. And a lot of them are. A lot of them really are. But hey, I'm sure there are some people that, when they passed on, had some sensitivity and maybe had the ability to hang on to that link, that connection to this world, that maybe they can come and find you. I've had a lot of spirit come through that were like that, to want to, get that message across. But once they pass over, they pass over. There's no contact with this world. They're in a whole other one. And that's why you have to watch who you go to. You know, I know where to find people because I can read the things I need to read to go, you know, track them. But others don't. And you have to be really careful because spirits will tell you what you want to hear. They'll tell you things that will be needed to hear to confirm that, you know, that it's them. And they'll send you down a spiral, you know, having you go back and go back, spending your money to talk to some medium that's not even talking to the person that they're supposed to be talking to, just so that spirit can attach to you. And that's why a lot of people get a lot of paranormal activity, you know, after that. So be careful going to other psychics and mediums after you've lost somebody. And also, you kind of want to give them a little time to rest. You know, I always say give them about a month before you go get a channeling done, you know, just so that they can settle in and, you know, attach to the place that they need to be in, because you don't want them being made aware that they're gone so that they look back and kind of get stuck in between the veil, because there are souls that do that too there, and they don't want to let go. They don't realize that they're gone. Then, you know, while they're already aware of where they're at in the in-between, they're looking in on this life with where they're supposed to go back here, and they aren't letting go, so they kind of get stuck in the veil watching life go on here. But once they go over there, there's no awareness at all. But yeah, some get stuck in between watching life, and you know, that's sad, because those that do, they get very angry, they get very frustrated. You know, they want their loved ones to hear them. They'll knock things over, they'll push in a chair, and they do become lower vibrational over time because of the frustration and being stuck in this in between where they're somewhat lost because they haven't gone where they're supposed to, and they can't go back to where they came. You know, so they do kind of develop that lower vibrational aspect of anger, frustration, and then spite, you know. So whew, that is how it works. But, you know, there are also people that are just very wicked, very dark, very corrupt. And those individuals, they end up wanting to hang on to this world more so because they don't want to let go of the things that they enjoyed, that pleasured them in those ways. And so a lot of the times they are kind of bulking up points, you know, in that lower vibrational realm, to where they do get to kind of intervene between worlds and using humans to kind of relive, you know, their deeds and things like that. And that's what's going on a lot today, is that, you know, with all the psychics being out there, with all these trends of psychics, and with, you know, all of the weather and the earth and the pollution being lower vibrational, with the dark consciousness rolling in, it has made the earth lower vibrational enough that it has affected the people, because you're walking on this earth and you're channeling the energy down into the earth, earth's channeling it back into you, it's coming out here into the air, so it's all flowing in your toroidal flow into the earth and back up and out and then into each other's auras if you don't have a protection grid. And that dark energy it's like a network. You're already a network with your consciousness being a collective here, but the dark essence of consciousness that is in the air is getting heavier and heavier and heavier, and it's making it more possible for that veil to go down, so that spirits on the other side have the ability to then, and these aren't humans, some of them are, but most of them aren't, and they are going to start stepping in and, you know, trying to do walk-ins, and you'll notice because you're just not yourself anymore, you know. But there are human spirits too that have become demonic. There are some that are still, you know, somewhat human, somewhat themselves from the last life, and they're just stuck, and they're just like, oh, I got to get back in a body, anybody. I don't want to die, I want to live. And they get that mentality, so they do end up becoming quite corrupt at some point. There's so many different things, you know, I couldn't give you one answer, but those are some of the things that I have seen. And there is a place called the Place of Rest, or some people call it the Summerlands, and it's a very beautiful place that a lot of souls that have, you know, reached their lessons, have done well, and they're not quite above 3D consciousness yet to not come back, but it's not time for them to come back yet. They don't have like a idea of heaven that's just their own, and they're just ready to let go and surrender and go with the flow of things. Those are the souls that will go to the Place of Rest. It's just a beautiful heaven. It has a little bit of every dream, every wish, every imagination there, beautiful gardening landscape, and those souls will rest for quite some time. And some of them will even take on the role of spirit guide. And I have met a lot of souls that have been in and out of there or are there still. So there are beautiful things and there are some scary things, but when you're going through grief, just keep in mind the best outcome for your loved one. If you grieve for too long, they may feel that attachment when they've passed. So, grieve for them, but be happy that they're going on with their transition. Because if you're too sad and you're hanging on, you're, really, really, really depressed, if they haven't really fully let go either, you're just going to keep them hanging on longer, and it's going to prolong them from transitioning. And that's not a good thing, because like I said, they get frustrated, they get dark, they get spiteful, because they see you living life without them. And, they haven't fully let go of their awareness of this world yet to enjoy the next one. So that's a very unhealthy situation for those souls. So that's what I got. Thank you so much for watching. I'm so glad to share this information with you, and God bless.